Welcome to the Everybody Matters podcast, a show dedicated to the idea that when organizations care enough to show their people that who they are and what they do matter, they unlock the only business idea with truly unlimited potential. I'm Brent Stewart, your host. This podcast is an outreach of Barry-Wehmiller. Don't forget to connect with us on the web at Barry-Wehmiller.com, on Twitter at Barry-Wehmiller, on Facebook and LinkedIn, and check out our blog, trulyhumanleadership.com. The last episode of the Everybody Matters podcast featured a discussion with Dr. Jeffrey Pfeffer and Barry-Wehmiller CEO Bob Chapman on wellness in the workplace. A lot of that discussion revolved around the idea that stress in the workplace is causing many of the health problems we are seeing in society today. On this episode, myself and Mary Rudder, Barry-Wehmiller's Director of Communications, talked to Dr. Rosie Ward. Rosie is a speaker, coach, and consultant whose leadership journey has dealt with addressing many of the issues of well-being and wellness in the workplace. Rosie is also an author. Her latest book, written with Dr. John Robinson, is called How to Build a Thriving Culture at Work. Their next book, Rehumanizing the Workplace, will be published next spring by Conscious Capitalism Press. Rosie was also one of the founders of the Fusion 2.0 conference, which she'll talk about later on in the podcast, and it'll return in 2020. As we talk about in our discussion, the issues with workplace wellness and well-being are much deeper than that of cost, which is usually the reasoning for organizations to implement programs to better the health of their people. We'll discuss those issues and some of the fixes in depth, but we'll start with Dr. Rosie Ward talking about how her journey into this world of bettering lives began.
So I have a unique path in that my background actually started in the fitness realm, and my undergrad is in kinesiology. And I really at the time thought that it was about making workplaces healthier through helping people be healthier. So I started out in workplace wellness, and I realized very early on that it didn't work. And I was working on my master's degree actually in public health at the time, and liked what I did, but really felt like part of me, I felt like I was losing brain cells, and part of me felt like it's the same old people that are showing up and we're not having the impact. And I just saw these broader issues going on in the company. And at the time, I didn't have a language for it. I didn't know how to put a name to it, but I just knew that there was a disconnect. And I felt really disheartened that I had spent quite a lot of money in student loans on 2 degrees to realize that you're on the wrong path and something is a dying field. At least that's what I felt like. And at the same time, I was also a brand new manager. In fact, they gave me a director title, which was ridiculous, but I'm in my early 20s. I have no clue what I'm doing, and I'm just trying to navigate the waters. And so I started getting my hands on every single leadership book you could imagine, and was trying to teach myself what to do and what not to do, because there was nobody to develop me. And I just knew that I didn't want to screw stuff up. And so that kind of began my interest in leadership, and I was just like a sponge and wanted to learn everything. And I think the turning point for me was I had left what I was doing. I was running programs and contracted at Target at the time, and I had left there and gone to go work in public health. And now this is the early 2000s, and I thought, well, I got a degree in public health. Why not go work there? And it was the first time in my personal work experience that I had been personally transported into a toxic work environment. So it was poor leadership and poor morale and just everything that I had read about what not to do. Suddenly I was in the middle of that, and I experienced firsthand what that did to me, someone who cared about their health and well-being, had 2 degrees, and I started getting sick. I gained 10 to 15 pounds. I started watching the clock and became, went from an overachiever to doing the minimum to get by, because why would I give more? And my friends started saying, Rosie, you don't seem like you. What's wrong? And my husband and I started fighting, because when you don't like what you're doing and you're crabby, you come home and you vent, and it just has ripple effects, as you know. And I remember this was like 4 months into the job. So it actually didn't even take that long for me to experience these ill effects. And I just had this wake up call, and I thought, no wonder why what we're doing in the name of workplace wellness or trying to make healthier workplaces doesn't work. If you take somebody and you transport them into a toxic work environment that can suck the wellness out of them, we're in trouble. And so here's me having this aha moment. And I thought, well, maybe I didn't waste my money on 2 degrees. Maybe this industry, if you will, is just off course. And I remember having this moment thinking, Rosie, are you seriously about to take on an industry? Are you seriously about to take on the good old white boys of the worksite wellness industry? And I thought, yep, I am. And I knew that I needed to broaden my own horizons. So I started to pursue a PhD in organization management and really started looking at culture and leadership and started getting into coaching and just really trying to understand a different way of looking at the culture and employee experience. And I had left public health, thankfully, while I was working on my doctorate degree. And it was through looking at stuff from this different lens and the work I was doing in my doctoral research that I started submitting to speaking at conferences and, started to build a following, and then eventually started doing paid keynotes and kind of expanded from there. And I just really felt like there were other people in worksite wellness, which is where I kind of grew up, that really were feeling the same way I was, who'd been doing it a while, felt like it didn't work, felt like they were beating their head against a wall. And I felt like I had an opportunity to maybe be a voice for them and to kind of help them put words to what they were experiencing and maybe help try a different way. So I just feel like I've been experimenting for many years, and okay, I know what doesn't work, let's try this. I know what doesn't work, let's try this. And really over time figuring out what worked. And I was working at a natural healthcare university, and we started to get a lot of requests. Hey, is your program, is what you're doing exportable? And I would go to the presidents of the university. There were 2 different ones while I was there, and said, hey, you keep saying you want to diversify revenue. I would love to try consulting. We're getting these requests. And they're like, no. And so while I was there, I actually got into a tit for tat, I will say, with the CFO. We never really saw eye to eye on what my role was. And one day he froze my budget until we could get on the same page. And I don't sit still very easily. And I was like, well, screw you. So I went to my office and I just thought, that's it. Like, if I was going to go out on my own, what would that be? And I spent that day researching names and web domains and writing copy. And I didn't really have a business plan. I just had this idea of, well, what do I like to do? Consult, speak, and coach. And what am I good at? And so then I wrote all this website copy, had this business name, which was Salveo Partners way back then, and met my husband for dinner and said, here's what I did today, honey. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And he was like, okay. And he's like, so how are you going to do this? I said, I don't know, but we're going to figure it out. And then I started doing it on the side a little bit because I was still finishing my doctoral research, and I got recruited out to go work for an insurance broker. They said, we don't get you, but we really like what's on your website and we think we need that. And for a while anyway, I had a great place for several years to play, and I had really forward-thinking clients that let me test the waters and challenge paradigms and say, let's do things a different way, and let's bring in leadership development, and let's really look at culture in a holistic way. And it just kind of started to build from there. And really, when we started really looking at this interconnectedness of organizational health and well-being and individual health and well-being, which now we call the fusion, it just started to make sense. And after we wrote our first book in 2014, we started to become even clear that it's not just about the interconnectedness of organizational health and individual well-being and a thriving workplace. It goes bigger than that. And it's really about having human workplaces. So we've really kind of refined that our purpose is to rehumanize workplaces. And so it's just really, how do we help people understand what it means to be human and stop treating people like machines that are predictable and controllable? And how do we bring more humanity to the workplace? And that's really been our calling and what we've been advocating for now for the past several years. It's kind of been an evolution from a thriving workplace culture where we honor these interconnectedness to really a human workplace culture, which is just kind of another level of it, I guess.
Yeah. Through your years of experience, you talked about a lot of stuff that we're doing not working. Kind of what are some of those workplace wellness kind of myths that you've been seeing that we've been trying, but aren't getting us anywhere?
How about most of it? Honestly, I mean, here's the fundamental difference, because I get asked this all the time. And I think the fundamental difference to understand why almost everything we've done in the name of worksite wellness doesn't work is a fundamental lack of understanding of adaptive versus technical challenges. And it comes down really as simple as that. So technical challenges are those that are simple, straightforward. There's a known solution. You can use kind of a mechanistic approach, a plug and play, and it's really simple. Like if I need to get a new smartphone, I know how to research features and good, I'm off and running. Or if I need to make some change in my business or my personal life, I can follow kind of a checklist or a standard operating procedure and I'm good to go. But there's this whole other type of challenge that we face that's called an adaptive challenge. And there's a ton of research out there by Marty Linsky and Ronald Heifetz that have pioneered this space. And it's understanding that when we face an adaptive challenge, we are literally entering into uncharted territory. And adaptive challenges invoke a sense of loss because they force us to let go of what's gotten us to this point, because what got us to this point isn't going to get us to where we want to go. And that sense of loss elicits discomfort. And as human beings, we don't like discomfort. We are neurobiologically programmed to maximize reward and minimize threat. And so, as an example, if someone says, hey, can you do a training for my leaders on how to have difficult conversations? I could go in with a framework or a model like Crucial Conversations, which is great if all people needed were some tweaks and framework and some, conversation starters. But if the thought of having to actually use that framework makes people want to throw up in their garbage can or anxious to use it, you're not dealing with a technical challenge, you're dealing with an adaptive challenge. And most of the well-being challenges that we face have a little bit of a technical component. There's things we can learn, there's skills we can build, certainly. But the overwhelming majority is adaptive. It's our own thinking, it's our own narrative of get in our way. Like we know what we're quote unquote supposed to do, why don't we do it? And most of worksite wellness completely disregards this and treats everything as if it's a technical approach. Let's put people in a box, let's incent them, which we know doesn't work. It only gets compliance. And it's focused on these narrow physical health risk factors, these behaviors that are not usually what's going on. And what we know from Jeffrey Pfeffer's research, who I know you've had on, and others, is that the organizational culture and the health and the effectiveness of leaders has a far greater impact on people's well-being than whether or not they're eating broccoli and wearing their Fitbit or their Apple Watch. And so most of worksite wellness has tried to put people in this box of, if we can reduce these biomedical health risk factors, that somehow healthcare costs are going to go down. And that's also been proven to be untrue as well. So it's recognizing that supporting the well-being of employees can't be done using this command and control, technical challenge, machine-oriented, treating people like small children approach. It needs to be part of a larger strategy where you treat people like human beings. They have meaningful work, they have quality leadership, they've got safe and effective environments, and then well-being can be enhanced, but it's not about getting risk factors down and controlling healthcare costs. That's an entirely separate strategy that shouldn't be attached to worksite wellness. So that's my long-winded answer, but it really comes down to not understanding the difference between technical and adaptive challenges and trying to use technical fixes for what are largely adaptive challenges.
But changing workplaces to be human workplaces takes adaptation.
Yep.
And that's the problem. People, if it were just a technical change, if those were technical changes, because I do think that people are far more accepting and interested in that's the problem, but they just don't know how to do it. So how are you telling people how to do that?
Yeah, it's a great question, because we all want the magic bullet and quick fix, right? And the reality is that when we're dealing with human beings, it's messy. And so how we do it, so there's a couple different ways. So our first book, How to Build a Thriving Culture at Work, really uses this framework that is a blueprint that's based on this metaphor or analogy that building a thriving workplace culture is similar in many respects to building a structurally sound and an aesthetically pleasing house. If you skip steps, if you use outdated materials, outdated sciences more appropriate for machines than humans, etc., it's not going to be so effective. And so we really look at it as not cookie cutter and prescriptive, but you got to start at the basis. So we call it the transformation points. And so transformation point number 1 is survey the land. You've got to really know what you're dealing with. And so what we've seen is that most organizations, they take what we call a whack-a-mole approach. They'll look at, for example, data on workers' compensation or disability leaves or workplace injuries, and then they want to deploy some kind of safety or risk management strategy, and they're doing that in a bubble. And then they will look at health data that may or may not really be relevant, and then they're deploying a wellness strategy in a bubble. And they might be looking at employee engagement data or exit interview data, and then they're deploying a retention strategy. And these various aspects of the organization aren't even collaborating or interacting with each other, yet they're all trying to impact the same employee and the same employee experience. And so when we talk about survey the land being the first step, it's look at the data holistically, bring people together, and don't overestimate the value of quantitative data. Yes, it has its place, but sometimes we're not looking at, the qualitative data. You can't necessarily measure everything, but are you talking to people and what's the experience like? And do you have a good sense of what you're working with and how interconnected the pieces are? Or are you going off and doing that kind of whack-a-mole siloed approach? So we tell them to just kind of first get a good sense of what the current state is, good, bad, and ugly, so you know what you're working with and you know where you have strengths and really goodness that you can leverage and where there are opportunities that you want to pay attention to and not do it in that very siloed way. And then the transformation point number 2, we call create the blueprint. And it's really about engaging people to look at the future. So this is where we bring the why work in. If they don't have clarity of their organization's why and core values, we're facilitating employees in the process to say, what would life look like if you were thriving, if you could bring your best self to work and home each day, and helping them kind of craft what do we have to start, stop, and continue. So we always say that people only support what they've helped to create. And so it's really now engage your employees in co-creating the new future and how you're going to get there. And so you don't have to force them or incent them. And then we move to transformation point number 3, which we use the analogy of pouring a solid foundation. And this is really leadership development. And this is where I love what you all are doing with Truly Human Leadership, because we really look at everybody has an opportunity to be a leader, that leadership's a behavior, not a title or a role. And really, it's really a people development strategy more than a leadership development strategy in the traditional sense. Are we really helping people to show up, not in that self-protected, armored mode, but showing up collaborative, showing up able to navigate the waters of adaptive change, able to show up and grow and stretch themselves and those types of things. And so really people development becomes a huge piece. Then we move to transformation point number 4, which is creating a supportive climate. And kind of, I know that you all have mastered kind of hardwiring these principles into your organization. How do you really make it part of operations and make it easy and give people a structure and a framework that allows that desired culture to be realized? We call that framing the house. And then transformation point number 5 is wiring the house. So again, that's really rethinking change and helping people change their inner narrative and really focusing on those adaptive change aspects that get overlooked and moving away from incentives and the technical whack-a-mole approach. And then transformation point number 7 is maintaining the house. And that's really kind of this continuous quality improvement mode. And so we use that blueprint as a guide to kind of say, hey, where are you? Where do you have opportunities to strengthen? And more often than not, every single organization we talk to, they're trying to do stuff in the later steps, like they're trying to decorate the house and they actually don't have a solid foundation, or they're trying to put the roof on and they haven't framed the house, and so, or they don't even have a blueprint, so they don't know if it's actually sturdy. And so it kind of helps give that analogy of why might they be struggling. And where might they want to start, and where might they have gaps that they want to fill in. And so we use that as a starting point to kind of guide discussions. And then within that, there's all kinds of different, tools and approaches and ways that we try to help people strengthen their culture and ultimately make it more human.
What's kind of the level of responsiveness as you're introducing these concepts into companies? What's kind of the level of responsiveness that you get from them in recognizing that it's very hard for people to change?
Yeah, it's funny. I will say there's a lot of planting a seed that takes a while to grow and percolate, because a lot of people will say, yeah, I conceptually get it, and it'll resonate, and they're like, yeah. And then immediately it's, I don't know how the heck we do it. Oh my gosh, we're not going to get the support. Oh my gosh, that seems overwhelming. Oh my gosh, it seems like it's going to take forever. Do you have something quicker? So it's and that's human nature. And so I think it's really about helping people see that, yes, you can do this elaborate plan and look at all, build this entire house, but you can also just start small. So one of the things that we usually, we get good reception, and then we get fear and, oh my gosh, are they going to buy into this? Do we have the tenacity for it? Is our leadership really going to be on board? If I'm talking to the C-suite, it's how am I going to get my managers and leaders to be on board? So it just depends on what level of the organization we're talking to. But most people, it resonates, and they're like, yeah, like we feel like we're spinning our wheels. Yeah, we're not really bought in that this is working, but we don't know what else to do, but we're overwhelmed. So really our role is trying to help them see an opening where it makes sense, see an opening where it doesn't feel overwhelming. And a lot of times we start small and say, let's pilot. Let's take a location or a department or a team and let's do some work and see what happens and let it grow organically from there. And in fact, our new book is really focused on the work we've been doing the last few years has been transforming culture literally one team at a time in the absence of having CEO support. And I think a lot of people underestimate the fact that that culture and psychological safety resides at the team level. And so you can really, one person can choose to show up as a leader and affect positive change. And when you have one team that starts to transform, it gets noticed and you build momentum, and then you can do work with another team and then another team and another team. So those are some of the conversations that we have and how our work has evolved to really help organizations find that entry point, I guess.
As you were talking before about getting to kind of play around in companies, getting to try different things, what were some of your most impactful realizations as you were kind of trying to find your way and figure out what this really all should be?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that some of my most impactful realizations honestly have been where, yes, CEO support is helpful. It is not a deal breaker. And that has been a huge eye opener for me. In fact, Raj and I had many conversations. He's like, really? And I said, really? Because here's the thing is I've worked with organizations where the CEO is who's brought us in and is all on board, and it falls apart, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 levels down, depending on how big and hierarchical the organization is. And culture resides at that local level. And so honestly, this lesson we've had and the realization we've had was on accident. It was an organization that said, hey, this team is struggling. Can you come in and help them? And we started experimenting and putting all of our tools in a toolbox and creating a multi-session program that's really focused on self-awareness and pausing and practical application in between, and helping them create a shared vision and really moving from the inside out. And it made a profound difference in this team. And like their retention got better, and they were communicating better, and there was less drama and less swirl. And the managers of other locations were like, or other teams were like, what happened? What'd you do? Can we get that for our team? And it was literally a freak accident, if you will, that started to realize, oh my gosh, we are transforming culture, and we're building a common language, and we're building a framework. And after about 10 plus months of doing this work kind of team by team and just growing organically, like any other kind of grassroots movement within the organization, then the senior leadership team started to pay attention and said, hey, we want to go through this program ourselves so we can understand it and better support it. So that has been the biggest realization for me, and really what we focus on lately is it does not have to start at the top. And even if you have top support, it still has to be at the team level. So even better to have support at the top, but not a deal breaker to be able to affect change and start to transform the human experience at work.
If you don't have that CEO support and certain teams are making an impact, or let me rephrase that. If you don't have CEO support and certain teams are kind of thriving, but other teams aren't, how do you start from the bottom to try to kind of spread that? I don't want to say spread the love, but kind of spread that enthusiasm or better working environment when you don't have that at the top? Like, what can you do to start spreading that around?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, this is where I say pilots are great, right? Because it can sound overwhelming to go, oh my gosh, we're going to start one team at a time. Pick a team that is doing okay but not thriving. That might be a good testimonial, right, for the work, to help them develop and become strong. I mean, that's what we do. We let's pick a team that kind of can be our champion, that has an opportunity to get better, and let's pick a team that is struggling. And we have never had a leader of a team say, oh my gosh, no, please don't help my team. So if you say, hey, can we experiment and try some stuff that might actually help your team, be more resilient and communicate better and enjoy their work better. And we don't position it as a remedial thing. We position it as a, here is work that you are being invited to try out that will help you at work and will help you in your personal life. And we say, we've taken it from more than 15 years of leadership and life coaching and really working with teams. And most people are like, wow, thank you. And it's multiple sessions long, but the first session is always focused on self-awareness. We use the principle of the choice line from conscious leadership of whether people are above or below the line. And we use principles from the Arbinger Institute about recognizing when their inner narrative is more of an inward mindset versus an outward mindset. And so we just pull from different people that we follow and work that we've done ourselves that really helps people put language to what they're experiencing and helps give them a common way of knowing when they're showing up triggered versus when they're showing up the best version of themselves. And they kind of get hooked right away because like, wow. And they come back and go, this is benefiting me right away with my team, right away in my personal life. And it just starts building from there, and you build trust, and then you just invite them into this work that it's over several months. But I think that you, starting with a team that's struggling, who is willing to give you a chance, is a great way to build momentum and to really get a nice turnaround story to help build that momentum to do it in other teams or other areas.
So once you work with a team and they go through the exercises of understanding themselves as individuals better, and they start to, as a consequence of that, function better as a team, what is the most important thing they need to do as a team each day to find success, collaborate and enjoy their work, enjoy each other, have better personal fulfillment?
One of the things that we invite from a common language standpoint that we invite teams to do is just the beginning of the day. And it depends on where they're working, right? If they just have a quick huddle because they're out servicing, whether it's patients or customers or clients or out and about, or it's a virtual team or whatnot. But we invite them to just do a quick check-in, just say, hey, where are you at today? Literally, like, are you riding the line? Are you above the line? Or are you below the line? And that just, everyone kind of knows that means I'm in a good spot. I'm struggling. Those types of things. And they've already done the work to kind of know how to support each other when someone says that they're stuck below the line that day. And so we invite them to first just kind of check in as a human being. How are you doing today? Where are you at? And then actually what's been really helpful is we've been using the model from the Barry-Wehmiller Leadership Institute about really kind of, okay, starting with why, like, here's our purpose, here's what we're about. Is there anything that we need to know about that's getting in your way of being able to be your best self today, or getting in your way of being able to further the why today? And really just helping people regroup and ground about, remember why we're here. Is there anything that might be preventing you from doing this that we need to know about? Checking in of where you are as a human being. When we do this work with them, we also, in one of the later sessions, invite them into that culture visioning process and ask them to talk about, what does the culture on this team look like when we're thriving? What are the behaviors we need to watch out for that will sabotage that? And what do we need to start, stop, and continue doing? And when our program's done, we give the leader of that team a checklist and kind of to make their life easy about, here's how you can use this in one-on-one meetings, in team meetings. We invite them we create this shared culture and guiding principles summary for them. So we invite them to pull it out during department meetings and go, hey, how are we doing against this? So we give them lots of different tips and tricks of how the leader of the team can create some formal accountability and structure, but that the team really is holding each other accountable to check themselves against this shared culture that they co-created, and to really use the common language that they learn in the program to help support each other when their humanity is getting the best of them.
So it's about relationships. It's about not necessarily liking each other, but respecting each other. But some teams are really big. I mean, when you get a really big team, you don't even know your team members. How does that work?
Yeah, so when we've had big teams, we've had to break up the work. But I think that here's the thing: if you have a really large team, within that team, there's sub teams, right? You have smaller teams that you work with that you do know. And so I think that still having the check-in and being able to say, how are you doing, breaking it up. I mean, we have, for example, we have a group that's got like in one area over 100 people that are technically on a team, but they really have subspecialties, sub-teams. And so we invite them to check in the way it makes sense. But really, those teams are kind of being divided up into sub-teams of saying, okay, hey, how are we doing today to feed our overall team's shared culture? So like anything, you have to work within a manageable chunk and really look at kind of locally, because that's really where that culture resides, is those smaller sub teams that you're interacting with on a day in, day out basis.
The nature of work is changing though, such that, well, even at Barry-Wehmiller, I see that we're all becoming more of ad hoc teams all the time. Yep. And so then it is important that everybody has the common language. So I imagine when you do a pilot, it's important then to expand so that when everybody's moving among different teams, it works.
That's the beauty of kind of developing everybody eventually. We have one client that is amazing, and they're just, the CEO reminds me a lot of Bob, actually, and I've told them that they should meet and did a virtual introduction, but I don't think they've met yet. But where we literally are doing all employee workshops where we are walking them through these exercises and giving them a common language so that when they are out at their respective branches, which are all over the country, and people are virtual and whatnot, that they do have this common language. And so I think that when you put intentionality behind developing people, taking the time, recognizing it's not a one and done, giving them the tools to reinforce it, and really at its core, creating a space where people have a common language, common understanding, and tools to be able to be more self-aware and get off of that reactive, guarded autopilot mode that we get to as human beings, and being able to show up more intentional and pausing and curious and collaborative. That's really that really can't happen in the snap of a finger. It happens through thoughtful development, and then it happens through ongoing structure to support sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that you're also involved in is the Fusion event. And Bob spoke. We were very honored to be invited. Tell us a little bit about how that came about, and what your goals for that are, and how that's been impactful.
The Fusion 2.0 conference launched November of 2018 in Minneapolis, and it was a 2-year labor of love. And you kind of realize that there's a theme with me and with our business that I get frustrated when something doesn't exist, and then I realize, well, why am I waiting around for somebody else to create it? I guess I'll just create it myself, or not myself, but with a team. I don't really do anything by myself. I believe you got to find a community. And so with the Fusion 2.0 conference, honestly, it was from speaking at HR conferences and wellness conferences and going to various events. And I was just really frustrated with how professional development is siloed. HR people go to HR conferences, and wellness people go to wellness conferences, and safety and risk management people go to their conferences. And I get it. You need to get continuing ed credits and whatnot. But my experience is that it's a lot of the same old presentations, that people are going as a mini vacation from work and kind of partying with their work friends that they've met, which is fine. Everybody needs a break. But they're not going back and actually able to apply what they do. And we're not addressing the fact that they're all trying to impact the same humans, and unintentionally many times end up undermining each other because they are working rather siloed. And so we thought, the world doesn't need another same old conference. Let's just address every single frustration that we've had at conferences, and let's look at something that's different. And so the whole vision behind Fusion 2.0 was, can we bring together people who historically are siloed and have them start to collaborate and create a more cohesive human experience at work? So we targeted business leaders and human resource and safety and risk management and wellness people and said, can we all come together and have a different conversation? And really about what does it take to put humanity back at the forefront of business at what we do, and get rid of these mechanistic, outdated whack-a-mole approaches that safety gets stuck in, that wellness gets stuck in, that HR gets stuck in. And then the second piece of, can we make this truly actionable? So the sustainability piece, that people don't get inspired by a couple keynotes and then go home and don't have any support for change. And that was nice, and I don't remember what I did. So there was a lot of thought and intention that went behind Fusion of making sure that we had diversity in every sense of form of speakers, that it was accessible and affordable, that it was actionable, all of those things. And so actually, it centered around Bob initially. I remember when I first met Bob and I was having a phone conversation with him, and I was telling him our idea about having this Fusion 2.0 conference, and we hadn't even built the website yet. And he said, I love it, a purposeful gathering of humanity. And I said, oh my gosh, that's it. So once we had Bob, yes, he'll be our opening keynote, we started building the website and we started, finding speakers. And I mean, it was amazing, the people that came out of the woodwork. Our core conference speakers are normally well-paid keynotes and said, I need to be involved in this. And that's how actually we finally met Raj, and Raj was our closing keynote. And I reached out to Bob Keegan, knowing him from my immunity to change work. And basically my thought was, all of the people whose work has influenced what we do, I want people to hear from them, and I want people to benefit from their wisdom. And I wanted to create this community of people who are going to go back and influence positive change at their workplace. Like, let's equip them, not just inspire them. And so we really didn't realize what a feat that was to do that. But what was really amazing is, we created this learning journal, and we had facilitators pause at the end of every session to help people process what they learned, and what did you learn, and now what are you going to do? And we had facilitated sessions where people could fill out these implementation plans, and we had a post-conference learning summary, and we sent people post-conference 30, 60, 90, and 120-day reinforcement emails, and even had a special follow-up webinar with some of the speakers just for attendees. So we really have been focused on helping them build community and helping them really take this and do this. And I didn't really know what I was in for, but I was just so in the mode of doing it. And what's amazing is, I kid you not, we got countless, I call them love letters. I mean, I got handwritten cards in the mail and emails, and I still got some even a couple of weeks ago saying, this was the most amazing thing I've ever been to. People had tears in their eyes. People said, I don't know what you started, but you have to do this again. And they said they showed up and they felt human, and they weren't posturing. We screened all of our sponsors and our exhibitors that if your work does not support humanity at the workplace and isn't rooted in sound science, we invite you to come and be enlightened, but we aren't going to endorse you as a partner. And so all of our exhibitors, people wanted to go talk to them. We put so much intentionality behind every little thing, and it was just great. And people are like, when's the next one? And oh my gosh. And so it's, there was a lot of lessons learned, but we're immensely proud of the impact that it had on people. And I had someone email me last week saying, I have totally built community, and we're still reaching out. We create our own private LinkedIn group, and when's the next one? And oh my gosh, I can't wait. And so I just feel like there needs to be a venue to bring people together to be having these conversations so that they realize they're not alone. And I think that's the biggest thing we heard from people is, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. I found my tribe. It's so refreshing. There's other people out there who really believe in putting humanity first. And so, so that it was amazing. And we're a small company, and so we kind of took a bit of a financial hit to get the first one going. So we are aiming for a September 2020. And right now what we're doing is we're diligently working to secure our early financial partners and sponsors. The local Conscious Capitalism chapter in Minneapolis, we've slated that as our official third quarter event for next year. And a lot of involvement now with Conscious Capitalism, and really just trying to make this a platform to help people be aware of conscious capitalism, to help them be aware of humanity at the workplace, to help them be aware of truly human leadership, and really just having it be a venue where these people who want to advocate and move this work forward have a place to go to really learn, build community, and be equipped with tools to do something different when they go home.
Well, as we wrap up here, kind of want to close on this. As you're working in the trenches out there, as you're seeing people every day that are frustrated and broken, and like you might have been when you started out, where you're in a toxic environment and can really see the effects, what's the hope that you're seeing now? What are the things that you're seeing out there as you're working with people, as you're in there in the depth of it? What's the hope that you're seeing for tomorrow?
Really, there's this revolution I feel that's happening. There's a turning point or a tipping point of people just don't have the tolerance for old school, mechanistic, dehumanized business as usual. They're looking for more. They're demanding more. People are wanting something more out of their life. They're wanting to feel connected. They're wanting to feel that they matter. They're wanting to feel that they are valued. And I think that certainly a lot of that has been driven with the millennials and the Gen Zs coming into the workforce. But I think everybody is just wanting more humanity. And what's encouraging for me is when you look at like the work that Barry-Wehmiller is doing in spreading this message, when you look at the growing chapters and companies that are signing on to the conscious capitalism credo, when you look at businesses that are saying we can do things differently, and you see that they're more profitable. I mean, you look at the firms of endearment and, they outperform the S&P 500 by 14-1 over a 15-year period. So there's financial benefit for organizations to start to do business differently. And that's what gives me hope, is that there are businesses that are out there that have stuck their neck out, that are saying, I'm not going to do it the old school way, and they're finding success. And so I think that we're starting to craft a narrative that it can be done in a different way. It can be done in a better way. And as I work with individuals, people are wanting something more. And I think you're seeing, like people gravitate towards the work of Brene Brown, who maybe they didn't even hear about her a few years ago. And they're really looking at how can I show up and be more authentic and have more meaningful connections. And just to see this drive, if you will, or just this movement happening of people wanting something more and wanting more humanity from a business standpoint in their life, that's what gives me hope and keeps me going, because it is building. And I feel like it's one of those, those cartoons where there's that snowball at the top of the hill, and as it starts to go down, it gets bigger and picks up people and things along the way. But hopefully there's not destruction at the end. But that's what I feel like. It's just, there's just this momentum that has just been bursting, and there's more and more books coming out, and more people that are starting to even change their language and talking about rehumanization. And that just is so encouraging to me, that we are helping to build a world where hopefully that dehumanization that people are experiencing won't be the norm.
Thanks for listening to the Everybody Matters podcast. If you'd like to find out more about Dr. Rosie Ward, her books, and the Fusion 2.0 conference, go to her website, drrosieward.com. She's also on Facebook and LinkedIn, and on Twitter at Dr. Rosie. If you'd like to find out more about Bob Chapman and Ron Zodia's book, Everybody Matters, The Extraordinary Power of Caring for Your People Like Family, go to everybodymattersbook.com. For updates on the book, this podcast, for a lot of great content and insight, don't forget to connect with us on the web at barry-wehmiller.com, on Twitter at Barry-Wehmiller, on Facebook and LinkedIn, and check out our blog, trulyhumanleadership.com. I'm Brent Stewart. Thanks for listening, and don't forget, Everybody Matters is the only business idea with truly unlimited potential.